Howdy all of you delicious people, I'm here today to view Grimm Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2. So, I had watched the movie called The Brothers Grimm, and so I did remember that this show existed. I didn't know if it was spelt the same way or not, because it's been a while since I've seen this show. And so I decided, I'm like, you know what, how about I just kind of check this show out, see what happens. And because I remember watching this show a long time ago, and like I remember some of the jargon, and so at some point it's just kind of like a muscle to kind of rework, and so at some point I'll get all like the jargon down, but it'll just take me a number of days to go on and get used to like the lingo. Because for those of you that don't know this show whatsoever, when I'm saying stuff like Vesson or Hexenbeast or Blutbot and Vogue, people just like, what is he talking about? What is he saying? Huh? I'm confused. Yeah, we have characters within this show that are to be these hybrid like things that are to look human but then also look like a animal slash monster. And so that is what a Vesson is. Voguing is, of course, when that hybrid character shifts between looking human to then looking like the animal slash monster they are. And so that is that is the transition. And so we at first are to focus on a character called Nick, who is to inherit this ability and a title to call him Grimm, because this guy is to have this ability to see these people become these monsters, and when the monster is to look at Grimm, they only see his eyes turning black, and so they know that he is a Grimm. It seems that Grimms have had a history of just killing off these Vesson, and so when immediately they see a Grimm, they're like, "Oh, we're gonna die," and Nick is like, "No, like I'm completely different than any other Grimm you've ever seen. Like I'm willing to talk to you instead of just killing you off. Like I'm a much different Grimm than you've seen." We also, like, right out of the gate, are to kind of throw a lot at people with all of this, like, technical jargon. But, like, once you get further and further into the show, like, you'll start to grasp it, you'll start to understand it, and then they'll just keep adding stuff in every single episode, and then you're just like, okay, like, this is a lot. But, I liked this show. Like, it was like it has more fantasy than supernatural things in it, but I just really liked this show. So Nick is to somehow like inherit this Grimm ability from a family member of his that is dying soon. And so it's like a next of kin kind of thing. And we'll find out there's going to be more than just Nick who becomes a Grimm. And like I thought that was really interesting when we start to kind of really break down all these people who at some point are like, oh yeah, I'm a Grimm too. Oh, okay, cool. You're not just crazy. No, you just have this weird ability for some odd reason. So, because they're somehow all connected ancestrally to the Grimm brothers, who I guess originally had this ability, and the stories are all true. So, as well as when somebody gets to find out about these powers, we have Nick who takes them into this trailer to say, like, hey, have you seen this monster before? Have you seen this thing before? And just like, yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, okay, all right. So yeah, there's a lot to just try and break down here. And so for a lot of you that again are just like, I've never heard of this show before, there was a learning curve, but you'll get there. So with that said, yeah, like at first when I was to watch this show, I wrote it off as like being a very goofy show. I was just like, okay, like this is so weird. They're throwing out a bunch of words to try to be massively different than anything else. But like once I got further and further into the show, I was like, okay, I like this show, but I just thought it was so goofy, and I was like, okay, I don't make sense. I don't understand like what is all going on. Like I didn't really grasp like why this was all happening, and because I didn't realize like the real true importance that a Grimm has, where it's like, oh yeah, it's either kill or be killed. So this guy or this whoever Grimm is like needs to get wiped out, so that way the Vesson can like live without fear of being killed. So within these first two episodes, the first episode is to, of course, have a kind of jogger running into this woods, and then she ends up having a Vesson attack her and getting killed. And I'm like, okay, like, I don't know how many, like, detective shows or supernatural things that you would always have to open a show with that. All of the time. Like I've seen like so many like I've seen the Dresden Files, like in the limited amount of number of episodes that I've seen with that, it's like right out of the gate there's an attacked jogger, and I'm like, yeah, of course you have to go with this kind of thing. So but at least like right out of the gate with the first episode, they give us a really good song right at the beginning of this, that somehow they connected to the whole entire episode. And I'm like, thank God that they ended up getting the rights for that song, right? Could you just imagine if the rights for that song were way expensive than this show would have wanted to spend, and they carried a whole entire pilot episode with that one song? Yeah. But anyways, I'm sure they would have gone on and done something else. But I guess they had a lot of faith in this pilot. So so we have Nick who is to go on and get a wedding ring that he's preparing to propose to Juliet. And because he really loves this woman, but then all of a sudden, like, his aunt comes to him and is just like, well, yeah, like, you know, you and Juliet, yeah, you should probably just be like, you should probably just call it a day with that. Like, yeah, like, you're gonna be like living the rest of your life like not knowing whether or not you're gonna live every day, if you're not doing that already because you're a police officer. But like, yeah, like you're gonna run into a lot of unsavory characters that you're probably not going to be able to explain to Juliet, and she'll probably think you're crazy because at some point it'll probably get to like, hey, I have to explain that I'm a Grimm to a lot of people, because that'll happen. So we have Nick who is having his aunt start to get very ill to where she needs to go to the hospital in this pilot episode. And so whenever it seems that Nick's aunt is to wake up, she feeds him a little bit more information, but not heavily enough, because again, that's what other episodes are going to be for him to learn more. You would think that like there would be some like Grimm journal of like a number of different kind of Grimms who have all left like these massive journals for anyone to go on and read as like a guide or something. But it seems that there is this book that draws or sketches all of these kinds of Vessin that Nick will also be drawing on his own to add to that journal or to that guide that is to be within a trailer within these episodes. Nick is to, by this first episode, come into befriending a guy named Monroe, who he, of course, is a Blutbot, and Monroe, it seems, is to be a changed man or a changed Vessin that doesn't go on and hunt and do all those things like all those other Vessin do. He's a reformed Vessin. So we'll come to find out that Monroe is to be this guy who works on clocks. He really loves Christmas. We'll find that out in other episodes if this goes well. And we'll just kind of find out some interesting things about Monroe, and he'll become like a really fun character that I really enjoyed. So Nick is to go on and learn some things from Monroe instead of having like Nick just kill him off. And so Nick, by this episode, is to come to find a Blutbot that is not Monroe, who is going on and hunting after women or girls, it seems, that are all to be wearing red hoodies. Kind of like Little Red Riding Hood. And so they make the connection there. And so with that said, I'm going to immediately try to go on and just go into the second episode. And so the second episode, and also the first, we come to find out about these Yaslich, who are these Reaper characters that try to go on and kill Grimms. I didn't even remember that Reaper characters even existed that try to kill Grimms, because I didn't even know that. It's like, seriously, there's Reaper characters that try to kill Grimms? Like, it feels like in the pilot episode they tried to do a lot. But I don't even remember like the Reaper characters ever coming up, but maybe it's a big thing. I don't remember. It's been such a long time. But anyways, so within the second episode, we'll have, of course, Grimm going on to find a family who is to be Jaeger bars. And so I had to make a screenshot here because I was like, okay, I had the thing, but I didn't have it in the row of which that I like to have it in. So these Jaeger bars, of course, are to be these bear Vessin. And so I was like, okay, like this is like an interesting way to kind of like start out the second episode with kind of giving us like mostly like animal kind of Vessins and then kind of dancing around. Weirdly, we by the end of episode 2, supposedly have a Vesson that appears like in this tree, and like when I was to go on and look it up what it was, it didn't really seem that when I looked up in the wiki, like they just said it was some creature that was undefined, and I'm like, well, if you scroll through all of the Vessons long enough, like I'm assuming that that Vesson is actually a bee Vesson or a Malefier, Malefier, a bee Vesson. It looks like it. That's like the closest like Vesson it looks like. So if I'm wrong about that, I apologize. But really, you can barely tell, anyways. So, but yeah. So in episode 2, we have this couple who makes their way into a cabin that they should not, and that leads them to meet the entire Rabe or Rabe family. And so, and all of this family is to be Vessons, and they are to have this kind of unusual, like, totem in front of their house. And so it seems that they are to go on and do these hunt traditions within this episode, as we have the father, who is Frank, who is the lawyer, who is to say it's like, oh, we don't do that anymore. Well, I guess they still do. So this family is to go on this hunt, and they take the 2 people that were to have broken into their house at some point in this episode and hunt them down. And so Nick has to try to help those people to save them from being killed by the Bear Vesson family. And so with that, like, that's most of what happens in the first and second episode. We also have Monroe, who is to also try and protect Nick's aunt, because of course we have Sergeant or we have Captain Sean Renard, who of course is to talk to Nick and mention to him, it's like, well, like, I know that your aunt is under protective custody because there have been attacks on her life, but like we haven't seen any attacks, like it's been a while since the last attack to now any other, so we could assume that that is to possibly be like a one-time thing. And so really we're just kind of take all of the police escorts away from your aunt, because it just kind of feels like a waste of manpower and so on and so forth. So Nick then is to have like Monroe go on and look after his aunt, and Monroe is to say, it's like, dude, you owe me like 3 already. Like, you owe me. So because Nick is to come into using Monroe, because Monroe has this ability of sniffing someone out. And so in the pilot episode, Monroe is to help Nick be able to track down this other Bloop bot in the first episode. And in the second, we have Monroe that defends this aunt. And so yeah, so that's kind of what happens in the first and second episodes. I'm going to go on into much more spoilers, and so hopefully at the end of the day you can say that you can watch this show. I would definitely recommend it. You might not understand it right away, but at some point you'll get there if you are completely oblivious to the show. Or if you to already been a massive fan of this show and you're just like, yeah, I know all the technical jargon way better than you, then I really do appreciate you going on watching this anyways. Thank you. And if I mispronounce anything, I apologize, but that is not my intent to viciously try to ill pronounce things unless it's to be a jokingly funny manner, like hospital or mansion. These things are to just be funny things that I am to change or phrase or whatever because it's funny. So, with that said, let's go on into all of this stuff. So let's get into that double five time territory. This show, the first two episodes, like, I would say that this show is like a solid okay. Like, I would rather wait for there to be like bigger event kind of episodes. Um, like, I am not like wowed and amazed by this show because really, uh, you have to like go on and learn what any of this stuff is, and that might go on and have to have you do some research and get knowledge and whatever, or just watch a plethora of the show. Uh, so there really is a learning curve to all this, and that's the way of which that I am to low grade this show, just because it's like we don't get the easy breakdown right away. It's like we have to watch it long enough to understand. And so that's why I would just call this like a solid okay show, until we go on and actually have these big events where we're going to be like, ooh, wow. So with that said, let's go on into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about the time you spoil this show. So, the first, of course, episode, we go on and have a woman named Sylvie Oyster who is to put some earpieces into her ears and start to listen to this song Sweet Dreams. Of course, you could probably have heard this song maybe through one of the X-Men movies when we have Quicksilver doing the speed time event and he's like listening to this song. And I was like, oh yeah, like I just recently heard this song via one of the X-Men movies, and I just thought it was so funny that this was put into the pilot episode of here. So, like by the time that I watched this show originally, I also watched the Quicksilver X-Men movie during that time. So, long time ago. So, Sylvie is to be jogging her way through these woods to then be attacked by some Vessin that we don't clearly see right away, but we have to make an assumption that it is a Bloodbot. So, because it's a wolf Vessin, it makes sense. It's a Red Riding Hood kind of connection here. So, we then transition to have Nick, who's going to some jewelry store, who is picking out a wedding ring for Juliet. So we have Nick, who is talking to Hank, and Hank, of course, is Nick's partner. Hank is to, of course, be saying to Nick, it's like, well, I might as well take a picture so that way I can showcase that this is the last time that Nick is going to be a guy who's not attached to a woman, so to speak, and to also kind of test the camera also. So Nick is to all of a sudden look at some woman, and Hank is like, hey, like, weren't you just getting a wedding ring for some woman? And Nick is like, well, I'm looking at that woman and kind of profiling her. I'm not looking at her butt. So Nick is to mention how this woman, Adeland, is to be a person who's a lawyer who is to possibly be having an affair with a senior partner. And so, like, he starts profiling her. And so, all of a sudden, we then have Nick, who is to see this woman in a different light because she is to change from a normal woman to then her Vesson that is actually a Hexen beast, which is a witch Vesson. And so Nick is like, okay, that's a little weird, that's a little strange. So Nick then goes on to his case, where he, of course, is to talk to this Forest Service officer. And so it seems that this forest officer is to have been called over by some man. And so they're not quite sure of whether or not that this is either a animal attack or this is like someone who had murdered someone, because there is a combination of these like massive boot prints, or there is like a presence, it seems, of like an animal like attack, and that this woman is to be kind of pieced all over the place, and is to have these pink Nike shoes. So we have both Nick, we have both Hank that are kind of looking around, and Nick is to hear music playing in the distance because I guess this girl's iPod is to have a large number of hours worth of battery, and Nick is to have, I guess, a good sense of music. So Nick and Hank find this girl's iPod, and so I guess this girl had this song on repeat, and it was to be the Sweet Dreams song. And Hank is to be singing some of the lyrics, and Nick turns to Hank like, "Oh, I didn't know you could sing." So, but jokingly, they end up using this song heavily in this episode, even to the point where the bad guy of this story is to be humming along this song, so that way it can tell us that, oh, like, this is the bad guy. So we have Nick and we have Hank. That Hank ends up taking the iPod so that way he can run some prints to hope that they can figure out who this is. And so Nick is making his way into the precinct, and he, of course, is to go on and see a prisoner who is also a Vesson, and he shows himself to Nick. And this Vesson is actually a Skelengek, who I guess is a lizard Vesson. And so I was like, okay, so we're getting some like kind of a mix of like, hey, this is a cool looking Vexen or Vesson. Let's kind of show this off and but at some points through every episode, they're gonna kind of focus on one kind of Vesson, and then they'll mix it up every once in a while, like towards the later and later parts of the seasons, when you start to see like a combination of different kinds of like certain Vesson will go after other certain kinds of Vesson, because it's just their nature. So you'll really start to see a mix up of all these kinds of Vesson in episodes. It'll be really fun. It'll be really cool. And so with that said, so Grimm, and I don't know if I've said this already, when a Grimm is to look and see a person in their Vessin form that I guess is to be called a Vogue, and sometimes certain Vessin can let humans see them in their monster whatever form, but that's under special circumstances. But the Grimm can see their form regardless, as well as the Vessin can see that this is a Grimm because his eyes turn black, and like Nick's eyes won't literally turn black, but like that's what Vessin see. Um, for them, that's how they can know that this is a Grimm. So so Nick is kind of very confused about what's going on here. So we have Aunt Marie that ends up arriving to Nick's place. And so come to find out, Hank is to go on and it is to get Prince off of the iPod. And come to find out, the Prince are to lead to Sylvia Oyster, and there has already been a missing persons report being done on this woman. And so, I think they end up like finding out where she lives, and so they go to the roommate and ask her questions. So Sylvie's roommate is to go on and like tell the officers like what she was wearing. She was wearing like pink Nikes, and that like the roommate was describing her to a T, and then like, oh, okay, so this is the right girl. Like this girl is basically identifying the body, so that we confirm who this person really is, and ask her questions about like, well, hey, like, did you know where she was going that day, and so on and so forth. So, like, does she have any enemies? Blah 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 blah. Like all that kind of setup and so on and so forth. They also were to figure out like what kind of shoe would make that kind of footprint, and I guess it was kind of like a construction kind of shoe, like this thick kind of boot. So they're like, okay, so we kind of can narrow down who is to possibly have these boots. So we have Nick and we have Hank, who are to find out that there is going to be a little girl who is to go missing, and that is to be Robin. And so it seems that Sergeant Wu, is to have gotten the report from Robin's mother and grandfather that this little girl Robin has gone missing. And so they're like, oh, so this must be in connection with both Nick and Hank make the assumption that there must be a connection between this case and their case, because this girl, of course, was to be wearing a red hoodie. So it's like, okay, so this guy, whoever this person is, must go on and be nabbing these red hooded girls. So Nick, while going into this woods and walking further and further into finding a neighborhood that is nearby, Nick notices there is to be a man there that switches from being a normal human-looking person to then being a Vessin, and Nick is like, oh, it's gotta be this guy. Just because he's a Vessin, it's gotta be him. So Nick runs to this guy, and come to find out that person is actually Monroe. Monroe runs back into his house. Nick tackles down Monroe and is to arrest him and just be like, aha, like this has to be the guy. Like he kind of fits the profile. He's by himself, and it feels like all the other people around him are just like, dude, this is random. Like you're just grabbing this guy. There's no real evidence here. Like what a blunder on your part. So Nick is to just kind of be like, yeah, I guess there isn't a real like reasoning, but like he turned Vesson, so I just naturally assumed it's this guy. So they end up having to let Monroe go because no evidence. So Nick makes his way home to Juliet to find out that that at the dinner table there is to be his aunt that arrives, and so Aunt Mary is to hug Nick and is to tell him it's like there's some explaining that I need to do, and so it seems that Aunt Marie has been here for a while, and Juliet had realized that that she was there. It's like, oh hey, hi, how's it going? So we have Nick and we have Aunt Marie that start like walking through the night, and Marie starts explaining things to Nick, and that she might not have very long. She might have a month, a week, a number of days. She's not quite sure. So Maria's asked Nick if he's been seeing some unusual things, and he's like, well, yeah. And so Marie's like, well, okay, like, I just want to tell you that all of the stories are true, and that at some point that you're gonna like become this Grimm at some point. So, speaking of which, we all of a sudden have this one Vexen that comes out of the shadows, or Vesson that comes out of the shadows, that of course is to be the Hostlish, who is to be a Reaper that tries to kill all Grimms. And so we have this Reaper trying to go on and kill Marie, and he ends up taking her down but not killing her. And Nick is to try to gun this Reaper down and kills it. I think it's kind of funny in this pilot episode, Nick is to ask Monroe at some point if he needs silver bullets, and Monroe is to turn to Nick is like, are you stupid? Like, no. You can mow a Vesson down with normal bullets, like you don't need silver ones. So Nick kills this Reaper, and come to find out this Reaper, his name is Hulda, and so so Aunt Marie knew Hulda was coming for her, and so Hulda turns from his Vesson form back to human form, and so after Nick's Aunt Marie is to be taken to the hospital and to go into a coma, Nick is to make it to the precinct and I'm assuming fill out paperwork for what had happened. So we have Renard, who is to talk to Nick and tell him it's like, well, hey, like this is your first ever like shooting, and so I want you to see like the precinct's therapist, because I know like killing somebody for the first time is really hard. So Like, just make sure you're going to go to the therapist and kind of talk things out. And Nick is like, okay, all right. So, coming to find out, uh, Captain Renard will at some point find out that this character is technically connected to Vessens. And, like, I don't want to give too much away right out of the gate, uh, but we'll find out that our captain here is to be a warlock Vesson. And, like, I didn't go on and like put the actual name of the Vesson on here, simply because like I have it, but like I don't like have it in the research here. So, uh, so Renard is also a Vesson, and at certain points we'll think that both Nick and the captain will be at odds with one another, but somewhere down the road they'll really just start to be working together as they start to realize that Nick is like, you know what, like this guy like is to be different. Like, let's figure out a way to just like live in harmony together. So, um, so yeah, it's kind of a cool transition with all that. Uh, so yeah, moving on. So Nick, of course, is to consistently see his aunt at certain points and realize that she is sleeping because she's in a coma. And so Nick is to mention about all the things that he has seen already, and also before Aunt Marie was to pass out and go into this coma, Aunt Marie gave Nick this key to her trailer and told him to like let no one take this from you because this is to be everything. And so Nick finds out that this is the key to this trailer, and so when he goes into this trailer, he will find like the guide of all these Vesson and all these weapons that are also to be inside this trailer. And at some point when Nick is thumbing through this stuff in this trailer, all of a sudden Juliet will just appear, and Nick is like, oh hey, like why did you come in here? And Juliet's like, well, like I just saw the light on, and so like I wondered what you're doing in here, kind of thing. So Nick goes on and explains at some point that he ended up with his aunt, and Juliet ends up asking Nick, it's like, well, you didn't end up in that trailer, did you? And Nick is like, no, like, if anything, like that's kind of like a whole extra thing that that my aunt evidently just had. So, because Nick didn't even realize that his aunt had that, but he realized it now. Because, of course, like, that's a lot of secret stuff that you would probably not want everyone to know, but slowly but surely at some point, Nick will start having people go into that trailer, but Nick will also be shifting the trailer around to secure it so that way not everybody knows where it is, because someone will try to break into it at some point. So Nick will have to try to leave it less and less like obvious where this trailer is, so he can keep it safe. Because there's specialty weapons in there that have to be like kept safe, so that way Nick can go on and find these certain specialty weapons to go after these specific Vessons. If Vessons were to obtain this trailer, they'd be like, aha, I'm going to take every single one of these specialty weapons, so that way Grimm can't go on and use these special weapons to attack certain kind of Vesson. It's the whole thing of that. So, So Nick goes on to meet up with Monroe, and so Nick, since Monroe's name is to be kind of cleared here, Nick is like, well, okay, I'm just gonna kind of follow this guy because I know he's a Vesson. And so Nick is around Monroe's house. Monroe pees on a portion of his house to kind of mark his territory. And so when Nick takes a peek in Monroe's home, Monroe crashes through this window and attacks Nick and say like, "Hey, like I thought you wouldn't come back here." And Monroe is like, "Oh, I'm just joking with you. I just wanted to scare you. And so you're gonna be paying for that window, right? Let's share a beer together." And Nick's like, "What? What just happened?" So So Nick finds out that Monroe is a rehabilitated Vesson, that he doesn't go on the hunt like all the other Vesson do. So Nick is to start to want to like get the lingo from Monroe, where he can't get it from his aunt, and so we'll come to find out that Nick consistently calls up Monroe all of the time for like the next understanding of a Vesson or what it could be, instead of Nick just going to these books or these sketches every single time. And Monroe will be a person who can kind of like tell us what these certain Vexen weaknesses are, or come up with a way to defeat these Vesson if they are to become a threat. So, or get some like history on these Vesson and so on and so forth. Like he'll become like the kind of the go-to person most of the time for Nick to understand this world. So, and Monroe is to ask Nick, it's like, well, like, so like you don't know anything about like about being a Grimm, like, and because Nick was never really told about any of this stuff. He's just figuring it out now. So Monroe is just like, oh, okay, all right, well, so Nick and Monroe are to at some point go off together into these woods, and so since Monroe has this scent ability, Monroe goes on to whiff out not only this girl Robin, but then also to scent out her kidnapper. And so that leads both Nick and Monroe to this home just out in the woods, this little cabin. And so Monroe is to kind of go on to like, yeah, the villain, he's in there. And it's like, okay. So Monroe just kind of puts like wolfsbane all over his body to hide the scent, and then is to put this all over Nick. And so both of them, instead of crossing this bridge, they just walk over this water, I guess to just be really goofy here. And so, and Nick and Hank end up doing the exact same thing. So both Monroe and Nick are to get closer and closer to this home, and Monroe, it seems, is shifting and voguing between the human form to his wolf form. So Monroe is to tell Nick that he feels that he needs to leave. And so Nick is just to call up Hank to say, "Hey, like I got the villain. Let's come in here so we can catch this guy." So Hank arrives, and so Nick is to kind of go on and put wolfsbane all over Hank, and is to have them cross this this little thing of water. And so we have these two people that arrive at this home. And so the owner of this home is to, I guess, just be called Postman, because he's to be wearing this like postman uniform. And so we see in early scenes that the postman is to take this red hoodie from Robin and put it in this closet with a number of red hoodies. And so the postman is to ask this girl if she wants some chicken pot pie. And Robin's like, no. Because I guess the whole idea here is for the postman to fatten her up, so then he can kind of like, yeah, like let's get this girl like in to be very beefy and very meaty to the point of him being able to consume her, as if he is like gearing up a deer to have like a good meal for a long stretch of time. So the postman is to keep this woman or keep this girl in this kind of basement that has this wooden door that has a rug kind of draped over it, so it's kind of like this underground like room. So but we have this girl who like smacks against this door, so I don't really quite understand how like this is hidden so well when at some point this girl could possibly be banging away at this door consistently when other people arrive. But she ends up getting tied up, so that's not a possibility for her to be banging away when others are to be shouting for her. So when the postman is to hear Nick and Hank arrive, we have them start asking this postman questions. And at first, it seems like he seems like a nice guy. He's like, "Hey, do you guys want some chicken pot pie?" And Hank's like, "No." And so, guy walks off to get prepared for his chicken pot pie. And like Hank is like, "Yeah, this guy seems very creepy, right?" Yeah. Like I don't think there's any way for us to say that this guy is going to be the guy. And Nick's like, "No, like I definitely know it's going to this is it." So what it all really comes down to is by the time that both Nick and Hank are leaving, they all of a sudden realize that this guy is to have been humming the Sweet Dreams song. And Hank realizes that, and he's like, wait a minute, like the postman is humming the song that girl had on her iPod. So this must be it. This must be the guy. So but really the only thing that they ask him beyond like where were you during uh this time and that time, and he was working on his or he was working because he was a postman, and he was to I guess consume this one while on his post route. And so kind of using his job as cover. So we have Nick, we have Hank who leave and then hear the song that he's humming. And so they go back in, guns blazing, and the guy ends up turning off all the power in the cabin. So besides like the fire that is burning, they can kind of barely see inside this cabin. And so at some point, we of course have the postman who changes into his other form, and they go after him and they kill him, and I think they end up like gunning him down. So now they have to go on and find out where this girl is. And with the broken glass that Nick is to see on the floor and is to see this rug, he realizes that there is a pretty decent gap that might say that there's something underneath these wood pieces. So Nick tosses away this rug to realize that there is some underground like kind of basement here. So Nick sees this basement, he goes under it, he finds the girl, he kind of unties her up and saves her life. So after that, we of course have like Nick being the big hero and how Nick was to miraculously figure all this out. That is to, I guess, be kind of Nick's just lucky ability, lucky for him. So Nick is to go on and visit his aunt, and so it seems that his aunt is to still be resting. And so, come to find out, we have Adeline, who is to come into this nursing room with this needle. And Nick, who has seen this woman before, like, wait a minute, like, you're a lawyer, you're not a doctor. And so Nick tries to get this needle out of this woman's hand. Adeline injects Nick somewhat with this needle that ends up being this like spider-like poison that we find out in the second episode. And Marie ends up waking up from her coma by the end of episode 1. So come to find out, when Adeline leaves, we find out that the captain and Adeline are working together. And so let's go into the second episode. So in episode 2, we have, of course, this couple that are both let me try to find the words here. Gilda and Rocky. They're both in this cabin. It seems that no one is there. It seems like these people are rich, so they're taking full advantage of all this. They're going on and sifting through this wine and putting on these fur coats and then throwing themselves into bed together. All of a sudden, it seems that Gilda is to hear this Humvee drive in. She doesn't say that's a Humvee, but it's a Humvee. So, come to find out, we have this Humvee with this massive deer on it, and then both Gilda and Rocky, they're like, oh, the jig is up, we gotta get out of here. So, Rocky drops Gilda kind of like down this window, and Rocky asks if Gilda's okay. She's like, yeah, let's try to get out of here. So, come to find out, we have the people that are in this other vehicle who are Vesson, and they go on and they attack Rocky, but do not kill him off here. And so, when Gilda is hearing some unusual sounds, she starts running like crazy to get out of here. And so she is to somehow be able to escape this whole her getting taken kind of thing. Because we have these Vesson in this episode that are to be the Jaeger, or the Jaeger bar, or the Jaeger bar, and they of course are to be the bear Vessons, and they like to go on this hunt instead of just killing these humans off. So, whoa, so we have this kind of funny like story within episode 2, because we technically have the Jaeger bar or this Jaeger bar family, who are technically the victims, because these two people were to break into their place, but then come to find out, like, technically in some ways both the groups are villains in their own ways. Not all of them, but most of them. So, with that said, so we go into episode 2, and so Nick at some point is to find out that his aunt is to be awake and be in the hospital. And so when Nick does go on and talk to his aunt, at some point she then does get tired and does get exhausted and then falls back asleep, and then the nurse is to pull Nick out and be like, hey, she's she's very tired, so just kind of give her a break. So Nick at some point in episode 2 is to realize that the captain is to waive uh, Nick's aunt getting police protection, even though there was obvious evidence of another person trying to come after his aunt, but there's no video proof of who this person really is. Because when Nick is to show the video footage of this woman coming to his aunt's room, you only see the back of her head. So the captain and Hank are just well, we can't tell who this is. So yeah, there's no real hard evidence here that we can kind of have this woman be a killer of sorts. We don't know the full story of it all. So yeah, so the captain is to try to waive his aunt being watched over by police officers, because the sergeant is to tell Nick, yeah, it'll come off as special treatment. So Nick, we're gonna waive police watching over your aunt. So Nick ends up bringing in Monroe to watch over his aunt, and Monroe is well, hey, this is 3 times you've owed me already in 2 episodes. And Nick is well, okay, I owe you, so I'm going to go on and have you just watch over my aunt. And so Monroe is to tell Aunt Marie that it's kind of funny that he's watching over her, because his family would feel that he's a disgrace to the family if Monroe did not go on and murder Aunt Marie right here and now, because she is a Grimm. And Aunt Marie wakes up and is give it your best shot, Blue Bod. Come on. I'm going to die here anyways, so you might as well just take me down right now. And so while Monroe is talking to this Aunt Marie, he realizes that there's 2 thugs that are walking around in this hospital, and he's okay, that seems suspicious. So Monroe looks into it to be attacked by 2 thugs, and so Monroe does go on and take them down, but then realizes that maybe he's gonna get some issues by him going on and taking down these men and not leaving this hospital afterwards. And so Monroe calls Nick about this, yeah, you should probably come down here, because I ended up having to take down 2 guys to save your aunt. So, because I might have to leave soon, because I might be under some suspicion. Excuse me. So, in episode 2, I'm kind of, in episode 2, I'm kind of saying some of this stuff out of order, but I just want to cover some things, and then, we'll get back to the main story. So, come to find out, Nick and Hank are at the precinct, and we have Wu, who goes on and tells the guys that there seems to be a case for them, and it ends up being from a girl named Gilda. And so we again have Nick, who looks at Gilda. She's just like, okay, like it seems that this girl is to be a girl who likes to take risks in all the wrong places, and so on and so forth, and like starts to profile her. So Nick then speaks to Gilda and is to find out that her friend Rocky was to, of course, gone missing, and this was to have been the house that they were last in. So Nick and Hank make their way to this house to find out about this family, who I guess Frank is to be the lawyer of this family. So Nick is to realize that they have this like massive totem uh, in the front of this house, and they are to have a bunch of like ancient artifacts, these unusual kind of weapons and or like items. And so we end up seeing this one uh, like bear claw slash like kind of fork like piece, which looks like a bear, which I kind of thought that was really cool. So we have all these unusual ancient items that Nick is looking through all of them. Like, okay, this is kind of interesting. So if we see like the husband and the wife, we then go on and see the son, as well as him with a number of guys who are all to have these motorcycles. And they all come in and they're playing around. And so, come to find out, like the son is where we find that this is a Jaeger bar and a Bearvessen. And so Nick is just like, okay, like so now I have to understand what a Jaeger bar is. And so Nick ends up talking to Monroe, and so these Jaeger bar like to hunt, and so Nick is like, oh, okay, all right. So Nick and Hank are like trying to figure out like where these people could be, and we have Barry as well as these other guys going on and deciding to plant these traps out in the woods for their hunt. And so they end up tossing this huge like dummy body, and they toss it in front of these spikes that are kind of hidden in this hole. And they're like, yeah, like this is definitely going to work if somebody just kind of comes running and doesn't realize that this massive hole is in there, and then they're going to get freaking stabbed into and probably killed. So, foreshadowing us that someone is going to fall in that hole, and it's not going to be either Rocky or Gilda. So, we. So, Nick is to at some point kind of like realize that that they need to figure out how to go on and save both Gilda and both Rocky, because somehow we find out that Gilda is to make her way back to Frank and Diane's home with a gun to find out where Rocky is and threatening them. And there, I guess, was a call in to Nick and Hank realizing that this was going to happen. And so by the time that Nick got back to Frank and Diane's home, they had already taken and knocked out Gilda, and Diane had told Barry, it's like, okay, good, like, we have even more people to go and hunt down later on. So at some point we have Nick who turns to Frank, and it's to say, it's like, hey, like, you guys are gonna hunt down this couple. And Frank tells Nick, it's like, well, we don't do that anymore. And Nick is like, come on, like, I know you're going to do it at some point. And so Nick convinces Frank to help him find the rest of his family before they kill these people off. And so Nick does go on and prevent these deaths from happening, but we do have Diane who changes into her Vexen and is to, like, become a full-on bear, and is to try and go on and almost attack Nick, but Nick ends up getting in the way, or getting out of the way, and Diane ends up running right into this spiked hole, where she ends up getting, like, poked quite a few times by uh, these spikes. So we luckily have it to where it seems that Gilda and Rocky aren't to be killed, and so we have a number of Frank's family that are to be arrested here. And so Frank is upset with Diane because it's like, well, hey, like, you've just kind of ruined our family, and because of, like, you needing to go on and do this tradition that, like, we honestly don't do anymore. And so really by the end of this, like, yeah, like, we have Nick who's to go on and try to save Rocky and Gilda from some certain death. But yeah, so what else happens in episode 2? Yeah, I think almost everything for the most point ends up getting covered here for most of this. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I forgot about, because I'm sure that there's some gaps somewhere. Oh yeah, we also had, when Nick was to re-meet up with his aunt, and it seems that she's awake again, we had a moment where there was another assassination attempt via this priest who is trying to attack Aunt Marie. And while she was defending herself and killing this priest, Nick is to be there. And so Aunt Marie is to tell Nick, it's like, well, hey, like she kind of like tells him, like like things to kind of know for the future. I don't remember what exactly she tells him, but it's like a motivational kind of thing. So, and then Marie dies right at that moment because she's already, like, really sick anyways. So, because she didn't get killed by this priest, but again, like, she was so weak and so brittle anyways that she was, like, bound to die. And that last bit of energy was, like, her last to really give to defend herself. So Nick is to bury his aunt, and so at this gravesite, we have Nick who is with Juliet, and in the distance there is some Vexen in the woods that we don't actually see And again, that is supposedly, I guess, some bee vesen is what I assume it is. That's visually what it looks like. But I think a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know what that is. I don't think the bee vesen ends up getting used in like the next episode or something like that. But I could be wrong. But if anything, I'll look into it into other episodes. Again, let me know in the comments below if there's something that I forgot, because I'm sure that there will be. There might even be some technical terms of which that I didn't say via the first runs of this, and at some point I'll get there. Uh, but yeah, so um, yeah, so I liked this show. I just think it's kind of like okay for now, and we'll go on to like bigger and more interesting story and bigger events. And some people have their own opinion about how this story was to break down because they liked certain characters, and some characters that they like may die at certain points of the show, and they're like, oh, well, I liked so and so character, and I didn't like that they killed this character off. Which I can understand that, but maybe there's certain characters that are just like, dude, like I only wanted to be on the show for X number of seasons, but I was there a lot longer than I thought I was going to be. So yeah. Um, so with that said, I'm going to go on and call this one. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.